impossible. Why would anyone be out here? Commander Liran Voss scanned the endless expanse of sand dunes stretching to the horizon. His ship's sensors picked up faint signs of life. A small cluster hidden among the canyons of Anthenar, a desolate, nearly forgotten planet that had once been the jewel of an alien civilization. Now, it was a wasteland, left behind after its resources were drained and its inhabitants forced to flee or perish. Voss's mission was clear: find any remaining resources, especially water, to help Earth's fleet replenish after years of brutal conflict and dwindling supplies. Commander? There's movement ahead. His second-in-command, Lieutenant Ava Moreno, whispered over the comms, pointing toward a small rise near the canyon's edge. Voss nodded, signaling his team to move carefully. As they approached, they saw shapes, worn, dust-covered figures peeking cautiously from behind rocks and crumbling structures. Voss motioned for his team to stand down and approached with his hands raised. "We're here on a peaceful mission. We mean no harm," he called out, his voice calm but firm. One by one, the figures emerged. A group of beautiful women. They looked gaunt, their faces weathered from years in the unforgiving desert. Voss could see the distrust in their eyes, but he also saw the glimmer of desperation. "We've had no one here in years," said a woman with striking, sharp features who appeared to be their leader. She introduced herself as Amara, one of the few who remembered the tales of the Oasis and the ancient dam that guarded it. According to legend, the dam held a reservoir of life-giving water that could transform the wasteland into a fertile sanctuary. But it had been sealed by their ancestors, and without advanced technology, no one had been able to breach it. Voss listened intently, realizing that this wasn't just a chance encounter, it was a lifeline. His mission had been to find resources for Earth, but he hadn't expected to encounter people left behind to survive in such harsh conditions. He knew the fleet would be interested in this oasis, but he felt a growing responsibility to help the survivors as well. "What if we could help you reach this oasis?" Voss asked, looking directly at Amara. "Our technology could break open the dam, release the water. Together, we could turn this desert into a place where you and your people could live, truly live." Amara looked wary but intrigued. The survivors had tried countless times to find the oasis, and though they knew its general location, they had been too weak and the journey too dangerous to reach it. After a tense silence, she agreed, but with a condition. If Voss and his team were to help, they would have to share the water equally, never claiming ownership of the oasis or using it for conquest. Voss agreed, though he knew this promise would bind him, even if it meant defying orders from his own fleet. This was no longer just about resources. It was a chance to bring life back to a dying world and help people who had been forgotten by the rest of the galaxy. With a tentative alliance formed, Voss and his team, along with the survivors, set out toward the distant canyons where the dam was rumored to lie. The journey was perilous, the desert winds merciless, and lurking dangers added to their trials. But Voss felt something ignite within him, a purpose beyond duty. He was no longer just a commander on a mission, he was a beacon of hope for these people. As night fell, the group made camp, huddling close under a sky filled with foreign stars. Voss listened as Amara and the others shared stories of their past lives, the vibrant civilization they'd lost, and the countless hardships they'd faced to survive. He could feel their pain, their resilience, and their hope that maybe, just maybe, he was the one who could help them reclaim their future. Tomorrow, they would reach the dam. As dawn broke, Commander Liran Voss and the group of survivors resumed their trek, each step bringing them closer to the elusive oasis that could transform their lives. Voss led the way. His team fanned out, constantly scanning the horizon for any signs of danger. The journey was as harsh as the desert itself, the unrelenting sun bearing down on them, and the winds kicking up sand that stung their faces and filled their lungs. But the hope of water, of a new beginning, kept them moving. As they moved through a narrow canyon, a sudden rumbling echoed around them. Rocks and sand began to tumble from above, and Voss barely had time to shout a warning before a landslide blocked the path behind them. They were now isolated, cut off from any chance of turning back. "We'll have to keep moving forward," Voss said, a hint of determination laced in his voice, as he scanned the group, ensuring everyone was unharmed. Amara and the others nodded, their faces etched with fear, but also resolve. The path ahead grew steeper and more treacherous, winding up a rocky incline that led them toward the ancient dam. This close to the oasis, the air felt cooler, and Voss caught the faint, tantalizing scent of water, a smell that drove everyone forward despite the grueling climb. At last, they reached a plateau where the dam loomed before them, a colossal structure covered in the markings of the long-lost civilization that had built it. Symbols and carvings covered the stone, their meanings lost to time, but the faintly glowing inscriptions hinted at an ancient power. Voss approached the dam's control panel, a rusted and worn-out interface that hadn't been touched in centuries. His team began unpacking their equipment, setting up tools and power cells that would give them the energy they needed to bypass the ancient locking mechanisms. This isn't going to be easy, he murmured to himself. But the thought of giving up didn't cross his mind. As he worked, the survivors gathered behind him, watching with a mixture of awe and anticipation. Amara placed a hand on his shoulder. Our people have tried to unlock this dam for generations, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. We were beginning to think it was nothing but a myth. Voss glanced back at her, offering a reassuring nod. It's real, Amara, and I think I know how to open it. With careful precision, Voss and his team rerouted power to the ancient control systems. Sparks flew, and lights flickered to life on the panel, illuminating the strange symbols carved into the stone. The hum of machinery vibrated through the ground, and a series of locks began to click open one by one. Voss's heart raced as he activated the final switch, feeling the ground tremble beneath his feet. Suddenly, a blinding blue light surged from the dam, pulsing outward like a wave. For a tense moment, silence hung in the air, broken only by the faint sound of rushing water from within the dam's walls. Then, with a thunderous roar, the structure began to release the water that had been trapped within for centuries. Torrents of crystal-clear water surged forth, spilling over the dam and into the parched desert below, carving new rivers through the barren sands. The sight was mesmerizing. The survivors stared in awe, their faces lit by the radiant flow of water cascading into the valley. The lifeless desert transformed before their eyes as the water spread, reviving plants that had long been dormant and filling the air with a cool, refreshing mist. Tears glistened in Amara's eyes as she looked to Voss. You've given us more than we ever dreamed possible, she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. Voss, too, was taken aback by the beauty of the reborn landscape, but he felt something deeper, a sense of responsibility. This is only the beginning. Amara, he said, watching as the water continued to pour forth, revitalizing the land. We'll build something here, a sanctuary for everyone who's been cast aside. This oasis will belong to all of us. As the water settled into a tranquil lake at the foot of the dam, Voss and the survivors descended, dipping their hands into the cool water, finally feeling the life that had returned to this desolate world. They drank, laughed, and celebrated, their spirits lifted in a way they hadn't felt in years. But even in their joy, vast new challenges lay ahead. They had created a paradise in the middle of the wasteland, and it was only a matter of time before others came seeking it. For now, though, he let them have this moment of peace, watching as the people he'd helped rescue embraced the waters and each other, their gratitude reflected in every smile, every touch. They had become a family in this harsh journey, bound by survival and a shared dream of hope. And as Voss looked around, he knew that whatever came next, they would face it together. As the first streams of water cascaded from the dam, filling the dry riverbeds, Commander Liren Voss and his team cheered, along with the survivors who had spent years dreaming of this moment. But their celebration was short-lived. An urgent beeping from Voss's comm device shattered the calm. Commander, Ava's voice crackled through, her tone sharp with alarm. Unidentified vehicles. Incoming from the north, fast. We've counted 6, no, 7, heavily armed. Voss's heart sank as he turned to Amara. They must have picked up the energy signal from the dam. They're coming for the Oasis. Without wasting a second, Voss rallied the survivors, hastily forming a defensive line around the dam and the newly flowing water. He instructed his team to prepare their few high-powered weapons while the survivors, armed with nothing but makeshift spears and crude defenses, huddled behind sandbags and rocks. Dust plumes rose on the horizon, the approaching vehicles roaring closer, a brutal reminder of how precarious their victory was. The first vehicle, a massive, armored sandcrawler, skidded to a halt just outside their defensive line. From the top hatch, a figure emerged, a mercenary commander, her face scarred and eyes narrowed, scanning Voss and the survivors with a predatory gleam. Stand down, she barked, her voice carrying over the desert wind. This water now belongs to us. Voss stepped forward, his voice unwavering. This oasis belongs to everyone who's fought for it. You want to drink? Then help protect it. Otherwise, turn back. The mercenary commander sneered, signaling her troops to fan out. Weapons aimed at Voss and his people. We're taking it, whether you like it or not. In a flash, the air filled with the crack of energy rounds and the hurling of sand as Voss's team engaged the mercenaries. Voss himself took cover behind a boulder, firing at the sandcrawler's open hatch, trying to keep the mercenaries pinned down. But their opponents were heavily armed and highly skilled, quickly breaking through the makeshift defenses. Amara, alongside the survivors, fought with raw determination, thrusting spears and throwing stones. Despite their lack of weaponry, their fierce resolve created just enough distraction for Voss's team to mount a counterattack. One of the mercenary vehicles exploded in a fireball as Ava scored a direct hit, sending debris raining down over the battlefield. The mercenary commander's expression twisted with frustration as she saw her forces faltering. She retreated to the safety of her sandcrawler, shouting, "Fall back for now, but mark my words, we'll be back for what's ours." As the dust settled and the rumble of the retreating vehicles faded into the distance, Voss and his exhausted allies exchanged glances. They had won this round, but the Oasis had become a target. Voss knew this was only the beginning. With the Oasis revived and life returning to the once barren valley, Commander Liran Voss felt a rare sense of accomplishment. The shimmering lake at the foot of the dam stretched out before them, casting reflections of blue sky and greenery that seemed almost surreal in the harsh desert landscape. The survivors, who had once known nothing but hardship and isolation, now found themselves surrounded by lush water and fertile land, everything they needed to rebuild. As days passed, Voss worked closely with Amara and her people to organize their newfound sanctuary. Together, they established a base camp around the oasis, setting up shelters, irrigation systems, and defenses. His team showed the survivors how to purify water, store food, and cultivate the fertile soil around the lake. They were no longer mere survivors. They were a community, united by a shared vision. One afternoon, as Voss reviewed maps with Amara, discussing potential threats and opportunities, Lieutenant Ava Moreno approached, her expression grave. "Commander," she said quietly, "our sensors picked up movement on the horizon. It looks like another group heading toward the oasis. And they're armed." Voss tensed, knowing that word of the oasis would spread quickly. The life-giving water would draw people from miles away, many of whom might view it as a resource to be taken, not shared. Turning to Amara, he saw the same worry reflected in her eyes. "This was inevitable," she murmured. "But we can't go back now." The approaching group soon arrived at the edge of the oasis, a mix of desperate wanderers and hardened mercenaries who had heard tales of a water-rich valley in the heart of the Wasteland. Their leader, a man named Relan Kale, stepped forward, a scarred, imposing figure whose reputation as a warlord had made him infamous across the desert. He eyed the oasis with a possessive gleam and sneered at Voss and his people. "This paradise in the desert belongs to whoever can claim it," Ryland declared, "and I'm claiming it now." Voss stepped forward, meeting Ryland's glare without flinching. "This oasis was revived by all of us here. It belongs to those who protect it, work for it, and treat it with respect. If you want water, you're welcome to join us as allies. But if you're here to take it by force..." His hand rested on the hilt of his weapon, his meaning clear. The survivors, seeing Voss stand his ground, rallied behind him, each picking up makeshift weapons or positioning themselves defensively. Even without formal combat training, their determination was unbreakable. They had been saved from death and despair, and they wouldn't lose their newfound home without a fight. Ryland looked at Voss, then at the determined faces behind him. For a moment, it seemed he would attack, but something in Voss's unyielding gaze made him hesitate. He was used to seeing fear, submission, but these people stood united, ready to fight for each other and the life they had created. After a long, tense silence, Ryland finally spoke, his tone laced with grudging respect. "You've got courage, Commander, and you've clearly inspired these people." He raised his hands in a sign of reluctant truce. "I won't take your oasis today, but don't expect every warlord to back down as easily." With that, he turned and signaled his men to leave. The tension evaporated as Ryland and his group retreated into the desert, and the survivors let out a collective sigh of relief. Voss knew this wouldn't be the last challenge they would face, but the show of unity had solidified their strength as a community. In the days that followed, Voss continued to work with Amara and the others to fortify the Oasis. They set up watchtowers, trained volunteers in basic defense, and established guidelines to ensure that anyone who sought refuge would be treated fairly, but would also be held to the community's values of cooperation and respect. As the Oasis flourished, word spread among neighboring desert settlements, attracting wanderers, families, and those in search of a second chance. Each new arrival was welcomed and taught the ways of the Oasis. Adding to the ever-growing community, Voss realized they had created more than just a safe haven. They had built a sanctuary for the lost and the weary, a place where hope could flourish in even the harshest of environments. Standing beside Amara one evening, watching the sunset over the lake, Voss felt a profound sense of purpose. What had started as a mission to find resources had turned into a journey of transformation. For himself, for the survivors, and for all who found their way to the Oasis. He knew they would continue to face dangers from the desert, but he also knew they had something powerful on their side. A community forged in resilience, bound by loyalty, and driven by a vision of a better future. As the stars began to dot the twilight sky, Amara looked at Voss and said quietly, "Thank you. You didn't just bring us water, you brought us life." Voss smiled, his heart swelling with pride. "No, Amara, we brought each other life, together." This brings the end of the story. Leave a comment if you listened to the end and enjoyed it. Thank you.